Hey, what's up guys? It's Clint Coons here, and in this video I want to follow up on the new Corporate Transparency Act. They finally released the final regulations, and if you know, you've caught my other video, I talked about the proposed regulations and what that means to you as someone who owns a limited liability company, corporation, or other business entity about the disclosures. Okay, so if you're not up on this, the Corporate Transparency Act was passed by Congress to ensure that the government is collecting information on every business owner in the United States that sets up a business entity. Now, the intent of it, as it's stated, is to ensure that financial crimes, money laundering, things like that are not taking place. And the only way the government can ensure that that activity is not taking place or give themselves a leg up to prevent it is to require you to disclose information about your entity. And so what does that mean? Well, this Corporate Transparency Act, as enacted, requires that any person who owns a limited liability company, corporation, any entity that is registered with the state, with a tribal organization, must provide to the government certain information about the individual owners and the people who exercise control over that company. Now, the Corporate Transparency Act, what does that mean to us as individuals who have set up LLCs for our real estate investing? Maybe you got a corporation, you're running your business. What's going to be required that you have to disclose? Well, here's what it comes down to. You have to disclose any beneficial owners that own at least 25% of the company. Now, when you disclose that, what's going to be required is that you provide not only the name, date of birth, physical address, your home address. You're going to have to provide that as well. You can't use a business address. You're also going to need to send in a photocopy of either your driver's license, a state-issued ID card, or a passport. Now, none of these can be expired. They have to be current. So this information has to be provided on any beneficial owner owning more than or 25% or more of the business. Now, what's tricky here is that it also takes into consideration the fact that you may own a business through a business. So let me just give you an idea of what I'm referring to. So let's assume that you have a limited liability company you set up right here. Some of the things I talk about in my videos all the time is that you would set up an LLC for your real estate as follows, and then you have that LLC owned by a Wyoming limited liability company down here, and you and your wife actually own this LLC, the Wyoming LLC. Now, under the CTA, I'll just refer to it as that, under the CTA, of course, both of these entities, since they're registered with the Secretary of State, must report. So the way you interpret this is that this entity here is owned 100% by this LLC. However, even though this LLC is the 100% beneficial owner, the true owners are these individuals down here. So under the CTA, for this red box here, you would provide information on these two individuals as the indirect owners, meaning that you own this company, which is essentially owns this company up here. So you would send in your information for this red box as the beneficial owners. Now, for the blue box, you would have to do the exact same thing. So you would send in the exact same information for the blue box as well. So again, photocopy ID, date of birth, name, and physical address. All right. So not only do you have to provide information about the beneficial owners, people owning more than 25%, you also have to provide information on any individual that exercises substantial control. And so this was there was a lot of controversy about that, or questions, and Treasury took questions and comments about the idea of substantial control and what that meant, and they did clarify it to some extent. And it really boils down to this. Anyone that is in control of this organization, that can decide how the organization is being run, you have to disclose that information as well as a beneficial owner. So essentially, in my example right here, you're going to get listed twice. You're going to be listed as the person who exercises substantial control over this red box. Now, how do you exercise that substantial control? Well, you control the blue box, which controls the red box. So they would consider that as being under your control, which it is. And same with the blue box, you're set up of this LLC. Let's say you're set up as its manager. then you would have to, again, disclose yourself as exercising substantial control. So you see, it does get a little complicated. For most individuals, it's going to be straightforward, though, in the fact that when you look at your entities, you own control of these things. Therefore, you have to provide your information. Now, if I set this blue box up as follows, that I own 80% of it and my wife owns 20%. Well, in that case, I wouldn't have to disclose her information with respect to this red box up here. But if she's listed as a manager of this LLC, her information would be disclosed as someone who exercises substantial control over the blue box, which in turn could imply that her information would need to be listed up here at the red box as a person exercising substantial control. So when you send in the annual report, which I'll get to in a minute about when that's due, you would have this, owners of red box. You would have this individual, control of red box. You would show this. All right, so she's still going to get picked up. She gets picked up under the control side, not necessarily as the owner because of our structuring. Now, if you think when you hear this, when I say that it's 25% or more, you're going, oh, well, Clint, I don't want to turn my information over to the federal government. I can avoid that by the way I structure my entities. So what you possibly might be thinking, you're going to set up an LLC as follows, and you're going to ensure that you don't own 25% of this blue box up here. So you'll create a number of other types of structures. Maybe you have another LLC here, possibly create a trust over here, another entity over here, another trust, and you'll split up the ownership amongst all these entities. And maybe you bring in a spouse right here, and then one more, we'll bring in a kid, a child. We'll say, hey, I don't own 25% because this entity owns 20%. This person owns 20. This person owns 20, 20, and 20. Well, even though you might think you're working around the regulations, it's not going to work for you because they took this into consideration. And the fact that you have indirect ownership of this blue box through these various entities that you control will require that you disclose yourself. And in fact, if you did that, the idea, or it may be that individuals who are looking, if they did look at your entity, may wonder, what is this person trying to hide? Why are they going to such great lengths to protect their identity? So if you use your children who are minor children under the age of 18, then you have to submit information about the guardian of that child or the parent of that child. Well, their information would have to be submitted if a child was an owner in one of your limited liability companies. Other things that came to mind when I was thinking about this, a lot of people use self-directed IRAs, and you set up an LLC that's owned 100% by your IRA. Well, again, under the same rationale, because it is your IRA, which is a trust, you're essentially treated as the beneficial owner for reporting purposes of this LLC. So you would list your name here as the beneficial owner, and you'll list yourself here as the person who exercises substantial control, because in most of these structures, when we set up LLCs that are held by self-directed IRAs, you're going to be listed as the manager of that limited liability company. So it doesn't really matter, you can try to get creative, and I know people will throw into the comments, well, Clint, what if I do something like this? I set up an LLC and I have a land trust over here and it owns 100% of it. I'm the trustee of the land trust, so then I wouldn't have to report. No, because your land trust owns the LLC, you own the land, you're the beneficiary of the land trust, you will be reporting. The thing to keep in mind, if you've set up trusts or you have general partnerships, these types of structures that I just described, they're not filed anywhere. So those structures do not have to report. The only entities that would need to report that, would be a corporation. So if you set up an Inc., that would need to report. So in that case, you would report on the shareholders, 25% or more shareholders, and you'd report on the president and potentially vice president of that company. If there's anybody else that has substantial control, you would probably have to disclose their information as well. Limited liability company would be something you'd be reporting on. If you set up a limited partnership, a statutory trust, Wyoming statutory trust. Again, I'm listing out entities that are registered with the state. So all of these entities are going to be required to report. So when do you have to start reporting? Well, this was a question, and a lot of people thought that it would begin this year. However, in the final regulations, the reporting period does not start until 2024. So this is when you begin reporting. So next year, you don't have to worry about it. So any entity that you've created prior to 2024, you will have to begin your reporting on that entity. And again, this is annual. Every year you're going to have to do this. You have to begin it in 2024. Now you have 1 year to report. So essentially you have until 2025 to file this report on your entity. And each year you're required to file an annual report on that entity. Now, if during the year there are any changes in substantial control or ownership, you are required within 30 days to update your reporting. So for example, if I started with a limited liability company here that was owned by a Wyoming LLC as follows, and then I decided to bring in a joint venture partner on this LLC, and they got a 30% interest, that would require that I update the FinCEN with the new owner for this entity within 30 days of this person being brought on. So you would have to collect information from them. You have to collect information, as I stated. You have to get a copy of their passport, valid driver's license, state-issued ID. You need their physical address, and you need their date of birth, and you need their name. So all that would have to be sent in with regards to this entity. Now, the other thing you have to be recognized as well is that the person who sets up the entity, that files the entity with the state to get it going, they also have to report their information. So here at Anderson, you know, we set up limited liability companies and corporations for our clients. And so starting in 2024, for every entity we set up here at Anderson, we have to disclose on that reporting, the initial reporting for this entity, the person who does the filing. So if my secretary, Deborah, for instance, filed a limited liability company for one of my clients for their real estate, then I would not only provide my client's information, I have to collect all that from my client as I just went through, but I also have to provide it for her as well. I have to send in a copy of her driver's license, her date of birth, her physical address and name, and send that in. And again, if she moves, I have to update the FinCEN as well. So that's going to be required. So if you set up your own entities, not only are you going to have to report on your beneficial ownership, but you also have to report that you're the one that set it up. So they collect information there. Now, this goes into effect in 2024. So any new entities that are created from January 1st of 2024 and on, those entities that get set up, you're going to have 30 days to provide that initial report. So existing entities have 1 year after the law goes into effect in 2024, but new entities that are created after that period have 30 days to make their initial report. And as I stated, you're going to have to update it. Now, if you're setting up a lot of business entities, or you know you already have existing business entities, and you're thinking, you know what, this is going to be really burdensome. I get it. Who the heck wants to keep sending in copies of their photo ID and address and everything to FinCEN on an annual basis? Well, there is some relief there. You can apply for a number, identification number, that you would receive this number. Again, you would send in the required information that I just described. They will issue you a number. Now, they have not yet finalized what that's going to look like, the form, and how to obtain that number. They will be doing that, I assume, within the next year. But once you attain this number, then you're no longer going to be required to send in all of that information. So say here at Anderson, since we set up a lot of entities for our clients, we're going to obtain those numbers for those people who do the filings. I'm also required to have one of the partners at Anderson send in their information as well. So each of the partners will have FinCEN numbers so that on an annual basis, when we're sending in all these reports for our clients, we won't have to keep getting photocopies from the partner or from the employee who did all the filings. We'll just provide that FinCEN number and we'll be good to go. Now, just like the entities, if anything changes, you are required, if you have been issued a number, to submit a updated report associated with that number so they have your current information on file. So I would encourage you, if, starting next year, I'll put out another video when they release how to obtain a FinCEN, so you can go out there and get your number if you have existing business entities. I would highly encourage you to do that to avoid having to go through the hassle of supplying all of that information on an annual basis with your report. And, it really remains to be seen how effective this law is going to be. It's just like anything that, the government seems to think that if you pass a law, you're going to curtail certain types of activity. Well, if that's the case, I guess we would have no longer any thefts and murders and speeding tickets being issued in this country, because there's all laws to prevent that, right? Or criminalize it, but it hasn't stopped it. So I really see this more as an additional burden that's going to be imposed upon individuals who are law-abiding business owners, and it's a way for the government to collect the information on you. Now, one question that keeps coming up: who's going to have access to this information? Well, they went to great lengths in the preamble to the final regs to state that the information is going to be held private. There was questions about whether or not they needed to collect Social Security numbers because the IRS wanted to have that information, but they chose that it was not in the best interest of the individuals reporting. That's not the intent. Therefore, they're not collecting your Social Security number, and that information isn't going to be shared with the IRS. Also, that information will only be shared with governmental agencies who are performing an investigation on a particular business. So I assume they would have to put forth some reasons as to why they need access to this. Now, again, it's a government database, and as we know, the Chinese and the Russians love to hack that information. So will that information probably make it out on the dark web? Now, that remains to be seen. I would assume, unfortunately, that it will at some point in time within the next 5 years. I wouldn't be shocked to hear some reporting come out that, the FinCEN database has been hacked and all these business owners' information has been obtained. I mean, the IRS, it happened there. But again, I guess that's just a burden of doing business in this country now. Anyways, I hope you got a lot of information out of this about the final regs. We have some time, not until next year, 2024, until we have to do anything, but that is the update. And guys, if you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that subscribe button. I wish you all the best with your investing. Take care.